and will want to be reassured that the government is doing everything it can to be clear to Iran that it cannot blockade the Strait of Hormuz, it cannot mine the Strait of Hormuz, it must not do that, and we of course will act with allies to prevent such an occurrence if it were to occur.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It seems for an hour and a quarter we've been going round in circles, in that in answering questions, the Foreign Secretary has rightly pointed out that diplomacy has failed to stop Iran reaching 60% enriched uranium. Likewise, he has rightly acknowledged that diplomacy has failed to stop Iran spreading terrorism and sponsoring terrorism around the region, yet each time he's concluded in a hope of greater rounds of diplomacy to solve this, and hope is not a strategy. So at what point will the Foreign Secretary acknowledge that there probably can be no diplomacy within a regime that is so brutal to its own people and that just won't listen?
The honourable gentleman is a bright man. He knows that once a country has acquired the means to enrich to 60%, the expertise exists, and only a diplomatic solution can create the framework to eradicate and control that expertise. And that is why, in the end, this can only be dealt with diplomatically, and it's why President Trump is urging Iran to return to the negotiating table.
David Taylor.
Mr. Speaker, as well as the Iranian regime's threat to Israel, the Iranian regime has also supported Assad to kill 500,000 people in Syria, including Palestinians, and supplies Putin with the drones he is currently using to massacre people in Ukraine. We must also remember, of course, that it persecutes its own people, including human rights activists. And just as ministers have, I'm pleased to say, engaged with Syrian activists in the UK to hear their views on the future of their country, can I ask ministers and the Foreign Secretary assure me that they will engage with human rights activists and democracy activists here in Britain to help guide their approach going forward?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend's question. His articulacy is spot on, and I can give him that undertaking between myself and the Minister for the Middle East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We talk weekly in this place about Russia's illegal bombing of Ukraine. Now, Russia may not be a close ally like the US, but presumably, if international law applies to that, then the US bombing of Iran would likewise be illegal under international law. If not, then could the Foreign Secretary explain why international law would apply differently to the US and where that leaves us if this conflict escalates in the region?
I say gently to the honourable lady, one should always be wary of moral equivalence. Russia invaded a sovereign country, and for the last years has been firing rockets into that country, aided by Iran. And we will continue to stand up to Putin's abysmal aggression, and of course he should be held to account.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Foreign Secretary for his continued clarity that the UK has not been involved in this military action in the Middle East, and thank him and his team for all their diplomatic efforts on de-escalation. I agree with what he said about the horrific situation in Gaza, where in the last week more than 100 Palestinians have been killed while starving and waiting for aid. He said he's pressed the US and Israel on this in the last week. Can I ask if he's continuing to discuss this and press for action together with France and Canada? And given his remarks about UK citizens in Qatar, what can he say about conversations with the Gulf and Jordan on protecting our citizens, assets and others there, should it be needed?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. Yes, I've liaised with Jordan, I've liaised with Gulf partners. I will be speaking to the UAE very shortly, later on today. We will work with them to keep them safe, and she's absolutely right to put on record our deep concerns about those who've lost their lives in Gaza just over the last few days.
And Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Foreign Secretary and his department for the work they're doing to protect British citizens here and abroad. What does he think needs to happen for Iran to abandon its ambitions to build and deploy a nuclear weapon?
Iran has got to recognise that it's lost its air defences, that it's my belief that its friends in Russia and China will be not rushing to its aid, that its proxies are degraded, and the international community is firm. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. They have now got to come back to the negotiation table. We've got to put in a framework that deals with the stockpiles, that deals with the centrifuges, and deals with enrichment of 60%, and deals with the problem of ballistic missiles.
Jacob Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Foreign Secretary for his statement and for his level-headed approach in calling for de-escalation. He's spoken about the further threat of escalation with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which, of course, he knows a large proportion of the world's oil supply flows. Can he say more about how he will protect UK households and businesses from these potential rising oil prices?
It's important that we de-escalate at this time. It's important that diplomacy prevail. And of course, it's important that we work with our allies for every contingency. So I'm not in the business of talking up fears about a shock in oil prices, but working to reassure the British people that we are doing all we can to see that that eventuality does not come to pass.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Iran must never have a nuclear weapon, is something this House has agreed on. But the former Russian Premier, Dmitry Medvedev, has said there will be now a number of countries considering supplying nuclear warheads to Iran. Can I ask the Foreign Secretary of his assessment of that statement, and what is the government doing to prevent it?
It would be wrong for me to go into detail about that, but to say that, of course, it's come to my attention, and also to put on record my grave concerns by the reports that Iran's parliament are preparing to withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. That would isolate Iran further.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Further escalation in the Middle East could have devastating consequences not only for the region but for global stability. And given the provocative and inflammatory rhetoric from President Trump and the risk of unpredictable US actions further destabilising the situation, can the Foreign Secretary set out what steps the government is taking to work with international partners to de-escalate tensions and protect the UK interests? And can he give a definitive answer to the question about UK involvement?
Well, can I say to my honourable friend that we were not involved. And over the weekend, I spoke to my Cypriot counterpart, I spoke to my Lebanese counterpart. In the days before that, I spoke to all counterparts in the Gulf. Of course, we are working to de-escalate at this time.
Subject.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the event that Iran does launch a retaliatory military strike against the US, what does the government believe our Article 5 obligations would be with regards to military support for the US? And how will that change if the location of the attack is in the region?
Yeah. Well, can I refer him to 213 of the Ministerial Code?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. With his 25 years of parliamentary service, the Foreign Secretary will no doubt remember when Tony Blair told us that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and were a grave threat to international security. And then, of course, we followed America into an illegal war in the Middle East. And if the Prime Minister were to go down that same road, then he will be wrong also. Is it not overdue that the government followed an independent and, as Robin Cook memorably said, an ethical foreign policy, one created here and not in Washington, DC?
Well, the honourable gentleman allows me to put on record what a privilege it's been to serve and work as Foreign Secretary alongside a Prime Minister of such tremendous principle and legal learning, that entirely understands his obligations, entirely understands what good government looks like, and is absolutely steadfast in his belief in the international rules-based order.
Cameron Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Foreign Secretary for the gravity which he's applying to this important topic. 1 week ago, the Foreign Secretary told me that he had huge confidence in our ability to defend our Middle Eastern assets from Iranian strikes. But within 2 days, 2 strategic assets were vandalised by a couple of civilians on an e-scooter at RAF Bryce Norton. Yeah. Does the Foreign Secretary recognise that the UK must not follow Trump into Netanyahu's war with Iran when force protection is inadequately resourced at home?
Well, I'm very grateful to the Honourable Gentleman for his service in the RAF, and can I refer him to a statement that the Armed Services Minister will shortly be making in the House about the security of our sovereign bases.
I think so.
Mr. Speaker, just a week ago we were here calling for de-escalation due to so many civilian deaths, but in the last week we have seen an escalation with so many more civilian deaths in Israel, in Gaza, in Iran. We know it's much easier to get into a conflict than to conclude it. If the justification for military action is now a nuclear weapons programme and being a threat to your neighbours, how many other nations fit that category? Isn't North Korea another country with an even more advanced nuclear weapons programme? Where is Article 51 UN Convention now in terms of justification?
Well, my honourable friend's question goes to the heart of why it would be a travesty for Iran to withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and why we must work to ensure that Iran does not become a North Korea. It must never have a nuclear weapons programme, and we will do everything to stop that happening.
David Simmons.
I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker. The family of my constituent, Katie Solomon, have been in touch to share their fears about her as she shelters from Iranian attacks in Israel. And my constituent, Mehdi Mosleh, has told me about how his life in the UK started as a refugee from the Iranian regime. So can the Foreign Secretary tell my constituents in the House why, given Iran's record, he is finding it so difficult to follow the Prime Minister in welcoming the actions of our allies in seeking to reduce the risks posed by the Iranian nuclear programme?
Well, can I say to the Honourable Gentleman that he will recall that in representing my constituency in Tottenham, I have the Stamford Hill area of London, which is the home of many in our Orthodox Jewish community, many of whom are in Israel as we speak, sheltering too in their bunkers. So the picture he paints is one that I recognise, and it's why I'll do everything I can to work with them and protect them.
Pinto Pszczynski.
Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my right honourable friend for his statement. Dozens of people from my Hendon constituency have been stranded in Israel and Iran. I thank the Foreign Secretary for his hard work on this issue, and it's good news that the first flight has already occurred. Can he say more about the timeframes for potential future flights, and also say more on what is being done to support those looking to leave Israel by land borders or by sea?
I updated the House about our rapid response teams that are working in Israel and at borders for those who are able to journey to the land borders in Jordan and Egypt to leave. We have a flight in the air as we speak, and I expect that there will be further flights in the coming days, but it does depend on airspace and how those days look.
Lincoln Chop.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Foreign Secretary for a statement in which he says that he's been crystal clear with the regime in Tehran. I hope he's been a lot clearer with them than he has been with the House today, because I'm going to give it one more go, because I genuinely don't understand why he can't answer this question. Does His Majesty's government support or oppose US military action against Iran at the weekend?
Yes. His Majesty's government will continue to work with our closest ally, as I was last week in Washington, DC.
On to Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I do thank the Foreign Secretary for his energy he's invested in de-escalation because it's the only moral route out of this conflict. And I thank him also for reassuring us that UK forces aren't involved and not giving up for the plight facing ordinary Gazans. There's 90 million people in Iran. Just under 10 million of them are in Tehran. There's reports of many of them trying to leave the country, and this will be made worse by the reports around the speculation around regime change. There's also reports that Turkey and Pakistan might be closing their borders to refugees. Is this something he's keeping a watchful eye on, and has he discussed it with our international partners?
Well, I'm very grateful to you, Honourable Friend, for the question, and it was why I spoke to our ambassadors and teams across the region this morning, because I recognise that this is a worrying and stressful time in all of those areas, which is why my central message and task is to de-escalate. We need more light and less heat.
If I heard the Foreign Secretary correctly, he said that the UK would act if Iran sought to block the Strait of Hormuz. Did he mean act militarily? And then under what other conditions would he consider military action? And what would he say if the Americans turned to this government and asked them for support in any military adventure to do with this conflict?
It would be quite wrong for me from this dispatch box to get into eventualities and operational matters at this time. But be reassured that all contingencies are in place to keep our people and to work with our allies to keep the region safe.
Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The most in-depth study ever conducted on the casualties of the war on so-called terror was conducted by Brown University in America. They found that directly or indirectly, over 4.5 million people lost their lives. 4.5 million people partially lost their lives because of what was voted for in this House. So can the Minister agree with me that the only resolution to this conflict is through diplomacy? And can he assure the House he will not follow the previous Labour government and the previous Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair's mantra when it comes to America bombing Middle Eastern country is with you whatever, and lead this country and the world into the abyss?
Well, I can restate, as I have throughout this afternoon, that diplomacy is in the way, and I can remind him that our government and successive governments have learned from the Chilcot inquiry.
Speaker, why should the House of Commons and the country that we represent not be entitled to know whether their government supports or regrets the American action? And doesn't equivocation in that issue bring succour to those we say must be robbed, quite properly, of their nuclear potential?
I think the people of Britain are entitled to know that we were not involved in this action, that we work for diplomacy and de-escalation. That is why I was sitting in the White House last week. It's why I was in Geneva on Friday, and it was why I was at a COBRA meeting and making a round of calls to allies and partners to de-escalate at this time yesterday.
Sarah Poach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Foreign Secretary, is he able to explain to the House whether the United States felt unable to use the Diego Garcia base and have to refuel in a highly dangerous operation 3 times because of that, because of your deal that you did with the Mauritians that would then tell the Chinese, that would then tell the Iranians?
The Honourable Lady has got to get off social media and has got to get some help. Has got to get some help because she's swallowing conspiracy theories that should not be repeated in this House.
Ellie John.
Answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Iranian regime has long been a threat to peace, democracy and human rights. But the unilateral, illegal and dangerously provocative Israeli and now American attacks have made a tense situation extremely perilous and are completely outside international law. It's therefore deeply concerning to hear the Secretary of State echoing the talking points of Netanyahu and Trump, instead of standing up for those principles, clearly condemning the illegality of these bombings and unequivocally ruling out the UK being dragged into any military action supporting such illegal action. Why will he not?
I'm focused on Iran's desire for a nuclear weapon. I'm focused on the UK's solemn obligation to stop that happening. And I am focused on the diplomacy that is required to bring that about.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Foreign Secretary for his statement today. I've often spoken in this chamber about the Iranian regime and the horrific human rights abuses that take place under IRGC control. I have nothing but admiration for the steps taken to destroy Iranian nuclear armament by our US and Israel allies. These are steps that we must support. So will the Foreign Secretary confirm that the UK stands shoulder to shoulder with the US and Israel as they do what needs to be done, and further that we send a message to Iran that retaliation in any form will not be acceptable and they will face the might of the best armed forces in the world, that is the British Armed Forces.
I can reassure the honourable gentleman that of course we stand with our allies in the United States and indeed in Israel in facing down the repeated threats from Iran, an existential threat of course to Israel, but a destabilising in the neighbourhood. Of course we will stand up to them.
Right, let the front benches change it. We now come to the statement for the business trade. Secretary of State.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I wish to make a statement on how this Labour government is backing British business and British workers with the launch of the UK's modern industrial strategy. At the outset, I would like to thank Dame Claire Barclay and all the members of the Industrial Strategy Advisory Council for all their outstanding work and that of my officials in preparing the launch of this strategy today. Mr. Speaker, in an uncertain world, stability, clarity and consistency are needed now more than ever. The challenges we face require nothing less than a government on the pitch, clearing the way for private enterprise and doing so in the best interests of working people. That is what this pro-business, pro-worker government is going to deliver. Today, I launch a strategy to make Britain the best place in the world to start and grow a business, based on a fundamentally new economic approach from what we have had in the past, a break from the declinism, the dither, the disinterest that defined the last Conservative government. This strategy speaks to the strength and breadth of our economy, be it building strong industrial foundations, powering frontier technologies, or supporting our world-leading services sector to innovate and to thrive. It brings together every bit of government to drive investment, improving the total business environment by drawing on every government department's expertise. It is a plan to rebuild Britain through new jobs, new industries and new investments. A plan to launch thousands of new careers in engineering, life sciences and professional services and more. A plan where Britain's future is designed and built in Britain. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I accept. Until this government came to power, British business was treated to a merry-go-round of policy changes, only matched by the shuffling of successive business secretaries. We are now providing the stability that is at such a premium across the world. Make UK have long called for, and I quote, a funded and joined-up long-term vision as a matter of urgency for stability and investment, and I couldn't have put it better myself. So from the moment we took office, we said we would pursue this new economic approach, where industrial policy would be something done with business and not to business. And we are fulfilling that commitment today. And I would like to place on record my thanks also to the thousands of businesses who've engaged in this process, that have designed this strategy with us. And this is not a document that will be printed and then forgotten. We will put the Industrial Strategy Council and the Industrial Strategy on a statutory footing to hardwire these changes for the long term. Madam Deputy Speaker, this government has brought stability and openness and a pro-growth agenda. But as I've told this House previously, working people must feel the benefits of economic growth. We must go further and faster if we want to achieve the kind of economic growth the public should expect and see in their public services
and feel in their pay packets. Business has provided a wealth of testimony and evidence to the areas they see as holding them back, and there are no surprises to that list. It starts with energy, because we have amongst the highest industrial electricity prices in the developed world at present. They went up 50% in real terms under the previous government. Skills, because when you have vacancies at the same time as 1 in 8 young people are NEET, and net immigration at 1 million as it was when we took office, something has gone badly wrong. And place, because too much of the country has been held back by crumbling infrastructure and a lack of investment and by the north-south divide. And that ends now. We will make the bold choices to ensure every region and every nation can play to their strengths. And finally, access to finance, because without access to capital, we will always have a ceiling on ambition. Today, we have smashed through these barriers. Let me take each of these 4 specifically in turn, starting with energy. Today, we have announced that we will slash electricity costs by between 20 and 25% through a new British industrial competitiveness scheme. This will bring our prices more closely in line with Europe, and it will be a game changer. We will also put in place the reforms we need for businesses to get the much faster connections to the grid that they need. Now, this means companies in sectors like car making and chemicals who will see their electricity costs cut. The scheme could benefit over 7,000 businesses with high electricity usage in industrial strategy, foundational industries and high-growth manufacturing sectors, which collectively employ over 300,000 skilled workers. As well as this, we will launch an expanded version of the Supercharger scheme so that some of our largest companies in electricity-intensive sectors, including investments in the future, such as the new Steelworks electric arc furnace at Port Talbot and the Agratas Gigafactory in Somerset, who will see their network charging exemptions rise from 60% to 90%, cutting their electricity bills and again making them more competitive than our European neighbours. I understand this was something the previous government actually promised to business, but again failed to deliver. And I confirm this will all be done without adding a penny onto consumer bills or onto the bills of any other business. Secondly, we are shaking up the skills system to prioritise digital, engineering and defence skills, so British workers can secure good, secure jobs in tomorrow's economy. Our industrial strategy sectors are already on track to create 1.1 million new good, well-paying jobs with the help of this industrial strategy. And we want those opportunities to benefit all of our constituents. That's why we're investing over £275 million in our engineering skills package and the Skills Mission Fund to deliver training and new technical excellence colleges as part of our wider skills offer. And through our global talent visa reforms and the Global Talent Task Force, we are also ensuring that UK businesses can recruit the best of the best from here and abroad. And on the issue of place, on the economic geography of the UK, which means a great deal to me and many of my colleagues who listened to grand plans to level up that turned into a few new extra flower pots and empty promises. I want to be clear, this strategy is unashamedly ambitious. It chooses to back where there are clusters of high-growth sectors, and it will work with the devolved governments, the mayors and local leaders to boost that growth. We're making it easier to get money to places, to turn investment into spades in the ground and cranes in the sky, through industrial strategy zones that will bring together our existing network of free ports and investment zones. And we will also, for the first time, include a new programme, identifying investable sites where we will fast-track development, similar to the approach taken in France. But our infrastructure must match our ambition, so we'll strengthen connections between city regions and clusters through the Oxford to Cambridge Growth Corridor, the Growth Corridor across our northern city regions, the Edinburgh-Glasgow Central Belt, and through rail enhancements in Wales. Finally, we will unlock billions of pounds in business finance, with the National Wealth Fund supporting our growth sectors, with an expanded role for UK export finance, and £4 billion for growth capital for start-ups and scale-ups through a larger British business bank, addressing that key stage at scale-up that we know is the most challenging. This growth capital will catalyse £12 billion of private capital across the 8 growth-driving sectors and deliver around £30 billion of additional GVA to the UK economy. Now, these measures, alongside our transformative sector plans, are how we can realise the untapped potential in key parts of our economy. For instance, by 2035, We aim to double business investment in advanced manufacturing, increasing the volume of vehicles produced in the UK to 1.3 million, while creating the first European market for self-driving vehicles. We are turbocharging our clean energy mission with investment in offshore wind, in small modular reactors, in carbon capture, in green hydrogen, in gigafactories, ports and green steel. We will make our United Kingdom one of the top 3 places in the world for creating and scaling digital technology business. That means training 1 million young people in tech skills and expanding our AI research resource by at least 20-fold by 2030. We will significantly increase business investment in our world-leading creative industries sector to £31 billion, cementing our position as one of the great creative exporters in the world. For our life sciences sector, our ambition is that the UK will be, by 2030, the leading life sciences economy in Europe, and by 2035, the 3rd most important life sciences economy globally, after the US and China. At the same time, we plan to double business investment in professional and business services to £61 billion, ensuring the continued growth in a powerhouse industry that accounts for millions of jobs in the UK, the vast majority of them outside of London. And we have already announced the largest increase in defence spending since the Cold War, and will use this to transform the UK into a defence industrial superpower by 2035, leading Europe in defence exports and closing the gap in venture capital investment in defence with the US by half. And for our financial services, the heart of business investment and stability, we will harness opportunities as markets digitise and adopt new technologies, and ensure the whole economy feels the benefits of increased investment. And this industrial strategy also ensures that places and sectors can take full advantage of the UK's position as a global hub for trade. The UK has long been and will remain a champion of free trade, which is why, under this government, we've delivered trade agreements with our biggest trading partner in the world, with the biggest economy in the world, and with the fastest growing economy in the world, making the UK the best connected market in the world. And through this industrial strategy, we are reaffirming our commitment to free, fair, resilient trade, while shielding businesses from supply chain disruption and market-distorting practices. We'll leverage our relationships with Europe, the US, with China, with the Gulf and beyond, so businesses can make the UK their base to connect with global markets. It will work hand in glove with the trade strategy my department will publish later this week to help British companies break into new markets, to export more and to grow more. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a watershed moment. For too long, governments have been a source of problems for British business and not a path to solutions. That has resulted in parts of the country like where I and many of us here grew up, where we watched yards and factories close along with the door to opportunity. A sense we were losing the past, but we had no bridge to the future. That also ends now, because our plan for change is backing this country's greatest assets and frontier industries to put more money into people's pockets, to raise living standards and to unleash a decade of national renewal. I welcome Make UK's comments that today is one of the most important days for British industry in a generation. Yeah. We are creating prosperous, proud and outward-facing but self-reliant, independent and highly skilled nation. A country where opportunity, skills and wealth are spread fairly, where every person and every business will have the chance to flourish. That is what our modern industrial strategy will deliver, Madam Deputy Speaker. Our future in our hands, built in Britain. That is what this strategy will achieve, and I commend this statement to the House.
I know, please be seated. I know that the